142 centimeters. I just want you to visualize that for a second.
It's tiny.
It's 4 feet, 8 inches. That is the first number you have to really get your head around today.
It's almost impossibly small for a cultural figure of that magnitude. I mean, that's the size of a child, really.
Right, and if you look at the old footage, she almost looks like she's drowning in that simple black dress she always wore.
Yeah.
She looks like a strong gust of wind on a Paris street corner could just knock her over.
Uh-huh.
But then she steps up to the microphone, plants her feet, opens her mouth, and the sound that comes out, it's not just loud.
No, it's tectonic.
Tectonic is the word.
It's a voice that sounds like it is tearing right through the floorboards. It's guttural. It's vibrating with this intense, almost terrifying sorrow.
Yeah.
You hear that sound and you picture a giant physically.
Exactly. You expect a titan, but instead you get the little sparrow. So today we are unpacking the source of that voice. We're talking, of course, about Édith Piaf. But this isn't just a greatest hits tour here. We're not just going to list the songs you already know.
No, because to really understand the voice, you have to understand the life. And the mission for this deep dive is to figure out how a street child, literally raised in a brothel, became the voice of France.
The voice of France.
And why her life reads less like a standard biography and more like a Greek tragedy that just happened to be set in the 20th century.
It's honestly wild. We're talking about a rise from literal street gutters to international stardom.
Yeah.
And that journey is punctuated by murder scandals, world wars, morphine addiction, and these tragic romances that feel like they were written for a movie script.
And what's so fascinating is how much of that she constructed herself.
What do you mean by that?
Well, that's a key point. The source material we're looking at is layered. You have the official biographies, sure.
Yeah.
You have the historical records from, say, the war years. But then you have the mythology that Piaf herself built around her life. She was a storyteller both on stage and off.
So separating the fact from the fiction is half the work here.
It's a huge part of it, yeah.
So let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because if we're going to understand the legend, we have to start at the absolute bottom. And I mean like Dickensian levels of bottom.
It's a very, very apt comparison. Her start in life was incredibly precarious.
Okay, so she was born Édith Giovanna Gassion on December 19th, 1915. Now, here's where the myth-making starts immediately.
Right out of the gate.
There's this persistent story, one that she loved to tell, that she was actually born on the cape of a policeman on the Rue de Belleville.
On the street.
Just right there on the pavement in the gold.
It's a poetic image, isn't it? I mean, it fits the brand perfectly born on the cold pavement of a working-class district, welcomed into the world by the law.
But it's not true.
If we look at the actual birth certificate, it's pretty clear. Hôpital Tenon in Paris.
So the pavement birth is just
Yeah.
a bit of good PR.
It is. But the tragedy of her name is very real and very documented. She was named Édith after Edith Cavell.
That's the British nurse, right?
Correct. Edith Cavell was a British nurse who was executed by a German firing squad during World War I.
Wow.
Just 2 months before Piaf was born, and she was executed for helping French and Allied soldiers escape occupied territory.
So right from birth, she's linked to this idea of tragedy and war and even resistance.
Exactly. She is carrying a martyr's name before she can even speak.
And speaking of survival, she had to survive her own family first. Her mother, Annetta Millard, who performed under the name Line Marsa, she basically checks out immediately.
Immediately. Annetta was a cafe singer who struggled with addiction and poverty herself. She essentially abandoned Édith at birth to her maternal grandmother.
And the conditions there were awful.
Just horrific. We're talking about neglect, malnutrition.
Yeah.
There were reports of her seeing bottles of wine being mixed with milk for the baby.
Oh my God, just a disaster. And her father, Louis-Alphonse Cachon, he was a street acrobat, a contortionist.
Right, so he wasn't exactly equipped for a baby either.
No, but he eventually scoops her up, and before he heads off to fight in World War I, he drops her off with his mother in Bernay, Normandy.
And this is the part of the story that usually just stops people in their tracks.
Yeah.
Because his mother, her paternal grandmother, wasn't just, a sweet old lady. She ran a brothel.
It's a detail that feels made up. You have this future cultural icon, a toddler, learning to walk in a house of prostitution in Normandy.
It sounds so scandalous to our modern ears. And, the media later tried to use it against her to paint her as morally loose.
Of course.
But if you look at Piaf's own recollections of that time, she speaks of it with this surprising tenderness. She called the women who worked there poor girls.
Which is such a humanizing way to put it.
Totally. Because for the first time in her little life, she was actually being fed properly. She was being washed. People were caring for her.
So it was a safe place for her.
It was. The submistress of the house, a woman named Madame Gaby, effectively became a surrogate mother figure. These women, who were so marginalized by society, became the first real family unit that Édith Piaf ever knew.
That really challenges your perception of that environment, doesn't it?
Completely. It wasn't a house of horrors for her. It was a sanctuary.
But then, right as she's found some stability, we hit the first major medical crisis.
Yeah.
This is the miracle of sight.
Yes, and this is a pivotal moment in her personal mythology. From the ages of about 3 to 7, Piaf was allegedly blind.
Blind. From what?
The medical diagnosis was keratitis, which is a severe inflammation of the cornea. And by all accounts, she really couldn't see.
So she's a little girl living in a brothel. She can't see. And I'm guessing the medical treatments in the 1920s weren't exactly advanced.
No, not at all. And they weren't working. So what do the women in the brothel do?
I can't imagine.
They pool their money. They don't send her to some specialist in Paris. They decide that science has failed, so they're going to turn to faith.
To faith.
They send her on a pilgrimage to Lisieux to honor Sainte Thérèse.
The visual of that is just incredible. A group of prostitutes funding a religious pilgrimage for a blind little girl.
It sounds like a scene from a Fellini movie, doesn't it?
It really does.
But it speaks to the community she was in and that specific kind of desperate faith of the working class in that era. And the crazy thing is, it worked.
It worked.
Shortly after the pilgrimage, her sight returned.
Okay, but do we think it was the pilgrimage, or was it just the natural course of the illness resolving itself?
Medically speaking, keratitis can resolve over time. That's true.
Right.
But for Piaf, and for those women, there was absolutely no ambiguity. It was a miracle, a divine intervention.
And that stuck with her.
For her entire life. This moment instilled a lifelong spiritual devotion in her. She kept a medallion of Sainte Thérèse with her. She prayed before shows. She believed she was protected by the divine, even when she was living in the absolute gutter.
So she gets her sight back, but the stability, of course, doesn't last. Her dad comes back from the war, grabs her,
and basically says, "All right, kid, vacation is over. Time to work."
And this is where that street urchin reality really kicks in. She's 14 years old, singing in the streets while her father does acrobatics.
It's a brutal, brutal life. You sing, you pass the hat, you eat if you're lucky. If it rains,
you don't eat.
You don't eat.
But she had this spirit, right? She doesn't stay under her father's thumb for long. She strikes out on her own with Simone Berthaud, who is known as Momone.
Momone is a huge character in the Piaf story. They were inseparable. Momone later wrote this whole biography claiming they were half-sisters, which...
That wasn't true.
It turned out to be false. But they were sisters in survival. They were basically just street kids, singing for coins, living in cheap hotels, sharing one bed, sharing clothes.
And living that life forces you to grow up way too fast. At 17, Piaf falls in love with a delivery boy, a guy named Louis Dupont.
And she has a child.
A daughter.
A daughter named Marcel. And this is the tragedy that really, I think, hardens her.
Oh, no.
Marcel died of meningitis at age 2.
At 2? That is just unimaginable.
And Piaf was essentially a child herself, grieving the loss of her own child. She had no money for a funeral. She barely had money for food.
What did she do?
There is a story she later confirmed, though again, with Piaf, you always have to check the myth, that she had to prostitute herself just to pay for the burial.
Wow. Whether it was a one-time act of desperation or part of a broader pattern of just trying to survive, the trauma is undeniable.
Absolutely. And when you hear that guttural pain in her later songs, that vibration in her voice that makes the hair on your arms stand up,
yeah,
that isn't an affectation. That's not vocal technique. That is Marcel. That is the street. That's the brothel.
It's the receipt for the life she had already lived.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's fast forward to 1935. She's on a street corner, singing her heart out, and a guy in a very fancy suit stops.
Louis Laplay. He was a nightclub owner. He owned the Gurney's Club right off the Champs-Élysées.
This is her A Star is Born moment.
This is it. He hears this raw, unpolished talent and just sees something totally unique. But his genius was that he didn't try to make her into some glamorous showgirl.
Right. He didn't want a Josephine Baker clone. He wasn't looking for feathers and sequins.
No. He saw this trembling, tiny, malnourished girl and realized that her awkwardness was the act.
That was the brand.
That was the brand. He dubbed her La Môme Piaf, which is Parisian slang for the Sparrow Kid.
The little sparrow.
Yep. He told her to wear a simple black dress, a knitted one, very plain.
Which becomes her trademark. But at the time, that must have looked so stark compared to the usual cabaret glamour.
It was a countercultural statement. It was radical. It basically said, I am not here to distract you with glamour. I am here to tell you the truth.
It framed her poverty as art.
Yes. It allowed the Parisian upper classes to come and gaze at the authentic street kid from a safe distance.
And it worked. Celebrities like Marie Chevalier came to see this Sparrow. She recorded her first 2 records that looked like she had finally made it out.
Yeah.
And then, bam, it's 1936.
The floor just drops out from under her. Louis Laplay is found murdered in his apartment. Shot.
And because Piaf comes from this rough-and-tumble background, and because she had some acquaintances who were, let's just say, mob-adjacent in the Pigalle district.
The police look at her.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah. She was brought in for questioning. She was accused of being an accessory. And the press, which had just built her up as this darling of the streets, suddenly turned on her with vicious speed.
Oh, I bet.
They painted her as this dangerous criminal element who had lured her rich benefactor to his death.
He was eventually acquitted, right?
She was acquitted, yes. But the damage to her reputation was severe. Her career was nearly over before it had even really begun.
So how do you come back from that? How do you recover from being accused of murder?
She needed a rebrand, a total rehabilitation, and she found it in a man named Raymond Osso.
Okay, who's he?
He was a lyricist, but he became so much more than that. He became her lover and her manager, but really, his role was her Svengali, her rehabilitator.
He cleaned house.
He completely cleaned house. He formally changed her stage name to just Édith Piaf, dropping the le Môme to mature her image a little.
Okay.
He banned her old, undesirable friends from the streets from seeing her. He imposed this intense discipline on her, and crucially, he commissioned songs that romanticized her past rather than letting it be a liability.
So he took the street urchin thing and made it chanson réaliste chic.
Precisely. Chanson réaliste is that specific French genre songs about the downtrodden, the poor, the heartbreak of the working class streets.
And Piaf didn't just sing this genre. She embodied it.
She was its high priestess. But just as she's stabilizing her career, history intervenes again. It's 1939. World War II begins.
And this leads us to the occupation years. This is a really, really complex part of her story, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Because living and working in Paris under Nazi occupation, it wasn't black and white for artists.
It was an extremely gray zone, and Piaf navigated it in a way that is still debated, though the evidence pretty heavily falls on one side in the end.
So what did she do? Did she stop performing?
No, quite the opposite. Her fame actually surged during the occupation. She was living in a luxury apartment above a nightclub that was, well, it was frequented by the Gestapo.
Oof, that looks bad on paper.
It does. She performed in brothels and clubs that were reserved for German officers and for French collaborators.
And she even went to Germany, right?
She went on a concert tour to Berlin that was sponsored by German officials.
Wow. So after the war, was she just branded a collaborator? Because that sounds pretty damning.
She faced an épuration, a legal purge trial. She was absolutely accused. But this is where the story gets really interesting and where we see the dual nature of her survival instincts.
Okay.
She wasn't just singing for the Germans.
No, she had an ace up her sleeve.
A huge one. Her secretary, a woman named André Bigard, was a member of the French resistance.
The resistance?
Yes. And Bigard testified for her. It turned out that while Piaf was singing in prisoner of war camps in Germany, she was doing something incredible.
This is spy movie stuff.
It really is. She was helping prisoners escape. The story goes that she would pose for photographs with the prisoners after her shows, supposedly just for morale-boosting souvenirs.
But it wasn't just for souvenirs.
No. Back in Paris, the resistance would take those photos, crop them to just the faces of the prisoners, and use them to forge fake passports and identity papers.
It is genius. Absolutely genius.
And then Piaf would go back to the same camp for another performance.
And smuggle the fake documents in.
And smuggle the passports in, hidden in her luggage or in her stage equipment.
That is incredibly gutsy. I mean, if she'd been caught passing a fake passport to a prisoner, that's it. Execution.
No question. And it wasn't just an abstract thing. There's a specific example that really highlights her loyalty. A Jewish musician named Michel Emer.
I know that name.
He wrote the song L'Accordéoniste for her, one of her big hits.
Right.
When the anti-Jewish laws started kicking in, Piaf didn't just hide him. She gave him money and used her considerable connections to help him escape to the unoccupied zone before the Nazis could get him.
So she's literally singing for Nazi officers in the front of the house and smuggling resistance papers and Jewish friends out the back.
It was a high-wire act of survival and defiance. She used her proximity to the enemy to save people from them.
And the court believed it.
Because of that testimony, she was cleared. She almost immediately went to perform for the Allied forces after the liberation of Paris.
Talk about a survivor. So the war ends, and Piaf is ready to take over the world. 1945. She writes the lyrics to a little song you might have heard of.
La vie en rose.
It's iconic. It is the French song. But I was surprised to learn that when she first came to America, we didn't get it.
No, the American debut was a total flop.
How is that even possible? It's La Vie en Rose.
It was a complete cultural mismatch. I mean, think about American audiences in the late 40s. They were used to spectacle.
Big bands, chorus lines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They wanted sequins, big orchestras, happy endings. And then Piaf walks onto the stage in that same little black dress, looking pale, looking sad, and just sang.
They thought she was depressing.
They did. They expected a showgirl, and they got a Greek tragedian.
So what turned the tide for her in the States?
A very influential critic named Virgil Thompson, he wrote this glowing review in a New York paper, and he basically explained to the American public what they were seeing. He said this was high art, not just pop entertainment.
He contextualized her.
He did. He basically said, you aren't supposed to be tapping your toes. You're supposed to be feeling existential dread and the weight of human suffering.
And suddenly, she became the must-see intellectual act for the smart set.
Precisely. After that review, everything changed. She ended up on the Ed Sullivan Show 8 times. She played Carnegie Hall twice. She conquered America.
And while she's in America, conquering the charts, she meets the man, the great love of her life.
Marcel Cerdan.
The boxer.
The French boxing champion of the world. This is the ultimate celebrity power couple of the era, the Sparrow and the boxer.
It sounds like a fable.
It was a global headline sensation, but it was complicated.
Because he was married.
Cerdan was married, with 3 children back in Casablanca, but their affair was passionate and very, very public. They were both these heroes of post-war France. Him for his physical strength, her for her emotional strength, her voice.
And this leads us to the most tragic moment in a life that was just full of them. This is 1949.
October 1949. Cerdan is in Paris, Piaf is in New York performing, and she calls him and she begs him to come see her. She's lonely.
And she tells him?
She says, take the plane, the boat takes too long.
Oh, that is haunting. Take the plane.
He changes his travel plans to please her. He boards a Lockheed Constellation flight from Paris to New York.
And the plane goes down?
The plane crashes in the Azores. Everyone on board is killed.
And she blamed herself for that, didn't she?
Completely, utterly, because she was the one who asked him to fly. The guilt was just crushing.
She performed that night, didn't she, after she heard the news?
She did. She went on stage and dedicated the performance to him before collapsing in grief. And in typical Piaf fashion, she immediately transmuted that grief into art.
Mille amour.
She recorded Hymn à l'amour, Hymn to Love, and dedicated it to him. If you look at the lyrics of that song, it's not just a love song, it's a bargain with death. It's a vow of eternal devotion that transcends the grave.
But you can't just sing that kind of pain away. This is where the real physical decline begins in earnest.
It seems like a domino effect after Cerdan's death.
It was. In 1951, she's in a serious car accident with Charles Aznavour, who at the time was her assistant and driver.
Right.
She broke her arm and 2 ribs, and the doctors prescribed morphine for the pain.
And for an addictive personality like Piaf, who was already drinking heavily to cope with her grief over Cerdan, this was the beginning of the end.
A total dependency.
A severe dependency on morphine and alcohol. And it wasn't just one crash. She was in 2 more serious car accidents shortly after that. Her body was literally breaking down.
She kept trying to find love, though. She was terrified of being alone. She got married twice after Cerdan.
She did. She married the singer Jacques Pils in 1952.
And Marlene Dietrich was the matron of honor.
Which is just a fantastic pop culture detail. And Pils, to his credit, really tried to help her. He got her into detox clinics 3 separate times.
But it didn't take.
The addiction was just too deep. They divorced in 1957.
And then, toward the very end of her life, she marries Theo Sarapo.
In 1962, Theo was a hairdresser who became a singer and actor, and he was 20 years younger than her.
Yeah, the press was cruel about that. They called him a toy boy, suggesting he was just after her money or her fame.
They were awful to him, but by all accounts, he genuinely loved her and he cared for her in those final, very, very difficult months.
And even as her health is just completely failing, she pulls off one last miracle. The Olympia concerts.
This is legendary stuff. The Paris Olympia is the most famous music hall in Paris. And in the mid-50s to early 60s, it was facing bankruptcy.
It was going to close.
It was. And Piaf, who was sick, barely able to stand, surviving on a cocktail of drugs and alcohol, she promised the owner she would perform a series of concerts to save the venue.
And this is where she debuts the song that defines her entire philosophy.
Non, je ne regrette rien.
No, I regret nothing.
It's such a powerful, defiant statement. Here is a woman who has lost her child, lost the love of her life, been accused of murder, lived through a war, destroyed her body.
And she stands on that stage and sings, I regret nothing.
It connects back to that idea of myth-making. The song is about wiping the slate clean. The lyrics say it is paid, swept away, forgotten. She isn't saying the bad things didn't happen. She's saying she accepts the cost.
And the French public who knew her story, they knew what she'd survived. When she sang that, they believed her.
They did, and she literally saved the Olympia with those shows, but her body just couldn't hold on much longer.
No. By 1963, she had liver cancer. She slipped into a coma. She was staying at her villa in Place Gassier on the French Riviera.
And here's the final bizarre twist in a story that just doesn't stop. She dies on the Riviera, but the official announcement says she died in Paris.
Why?
This is a bit of macabre devotion from her husband. She died on October 10th, 1963. But her husband, Theo Serapeau, and her nurse knew that Piaf wanted to die in Paris.
She was a Parisian through and through.
Absolutely. She didn't want to die in the sunny south. She wanted to die in her city.
So what do?
They put her body in a car. They propped her up in the back seat to look like she was just sleeping. And they drove through the night, illegally transporting a corpse across France all the way back to her apartment in Paris.
That is insane. Smuggling the body of the most famous woman in France so that her fans would think she died at home.
They announced her death the next morning in Paris. Her last words were reportedly, "Every damn thing you do in this life, you have to pay for."
Chilling. And true in her case.
The public reaction was unprecedented. The funeral procession drew tens of thousands of people into the streets. Charles Aznavour said it was the only time since World War II that Parisian traffic came to a complete and total halt.
But the church wasn't as forgiving as the fans were.
No. The Catholic Church initially denied her a requiem mass. The Cardinal of Paris, Maurice Felton, refused it because she had remarried in the Orthodox Church. That's her marriage to Theo Serapeau. And because of her sinful lifestyle.
Which is so ironic, considering her lifelong devotion to Sainte Therese. She credited her very eyesight to the Catholic faith.
Extremely ironic. But the people didn't care about the cardinal's opinion. They showed up in the hundreds of thousands at Père Lachaise Cemetery. It was this massive public outpouring of grief.
Did the church ever come around?
It took 50 years. It wasn't until 2013, on the 50th anniversary of her death, that the church finally relented and granted her that requiem mass in her home parish.
Wow. Better late than never, I guess.
It just speaks to how complicated her legacy was. She was a sinner and a saint, a collaborator and a resistor, a street kid and a queen. She never fit the mold of a good woman, but she was a great, great artist.
And her legacy is still huge. I mean, we had the incredible biopic La Vie en Rose with Marion Cotillard, which won an Oscar.
A fantastic transformative performance. And just recently, you only have to think about the 2024 Olympic opening ceremony in Paris.
Celine Dion.
Standing on the Eiffel Tower, of all places, singing L'Hymne à l'amour.
Which brings it all completely full circle. The Tiny Sparrows song, her hymn to her lost love, ringing out over Paris once again.
And that really is the core of it, isn't it? We started this by talking about her tiny stature versus her enormous voice.
Yeah.
The reason she is still so relevant, the reason we're doing a deep dive on her almost 65 years after her death, is that she represents ultimate vulnerability and ultimate strength at the exact same time. She didn't hide her scars. She sang them.
She lived the lyrics. Love, loss, and absolutely no regrets.
Exactly. She paid for everything she did, just like she said, but she left something immortal behind.
Well, this has been an incredible journey, from the brothels of Normandy to the stage of Carnegie Hall.
A life fully and tragically lived.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive on Édith Piaf. Before you go, here's a thought to chew on. In an age of auto-tune and perfectly curated social media images, Piaf was messy, tragic, and undeniably real. Does that kind of raw authenticity even exist in stardom today? Or was she the last of a dying breed?
That is the question.
Get you on the next deep dive.